Welcome, everybody. We're thrilled to have all of you with us today for our Don't Quarantine Your Career series here at Forté. I'm Melissa Sangster. I'm the CEO, and we have a special guest today here to talk with us about acting on the important and not reacting to the urgent. Lena Renee from Franklin Covey has joined us. She is a Vice President of Consulting at Franklin Covey, and she's an author of a couple of books too, Leading Loyalty and The 5 Choices. And I think you're going to have a wonderful interactive session, and we're really excited to have her join us today. So Lena, I'm going to pass the torch over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. Great to be with you, and just pleased. I see some familiar names. Can I have you, at the bottom of your Zoom window, there's the reactions. Can I have you do a thumbs up if you were on our session that was just over an hour ago? Any of you that were on that? Oh, very good. Okay, lovely. Thank you for joining again. For you, it will have a neat connection to what we just talked about. But good to see so many of you joining new as well. This is just the same as the last one, is going to be very interactive, lots of conversation, chat. We will do the breakout room again. And I love it so much if you're comfortable coming on video. So to me, it's just how we connect, and it's how I connect. So if you're comfortable with keeping your video on, it is okay if you're laying in bed. Whatever that is, we are going to love you for being on video regardless. So if you're comfortable with that, do that. Beyond that, we will ask you to come off mute and talk to us about what you're thinking. Lots in the chat. You're welcome to chat questions and thoughts about what we're talking about. And if you keep an eye on the chat, you're welcome to just chat on to what someone else says as well. So it can be a bit of an interactive tool for us there too. Okay, so our session today is anchored in productivity, and Franklin Covey has studied productivity for a really long time. So over 30 years that we've been in this field of productivity. And what we know is that productivity in today's world looks very different than it did 35 years ago when we began productivity. It looks different than it did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right? Productivity has evolved, and certainly the last 7 weeks, productivity has looked very different as well. So let me share with you kind of some anchoring thoughts around this, and then we'll get into the conversation about it as well. So we stumbled on this paradox when we started writing the book and developing the content. Paradox being that in today's world, it is both easier and harder than ever to achieve extraordinary productivity. And of course, this is today's world in the big sense, right? Just current modern times. And it's very much today's world in the COVID sense as well, right? It is both easier and harder to be productive. Now, as we developed this content, what we realized is that we really, if we wanted people to be more productive, we had to help them wrangle what is more difficult about today's world. So, and I'm going to have you in the chat or come off mute. This is in the big sense, the broad sense of today's world, not COVID, but just generally. Why is it more difficult to be productive, would you say? Again, you're welcome to unmute and share your thoughts or chat them. Why is it more difficult in today's world to be productive? Okay, great. Despina, thank you. Too connected, too accessible, right? What else would you say? Gabrielle, the schedule's more demanding. Thank you. Hafsa, it's more distractions, right? You can see some of these things are tied into our technology, which can clearly accelerate our productivity as well. And that's a challenge because the same thing that makes you more productive can make you less productive. The exact same thing, right? Your technology, our connectedness, our access to information. Thank you for the comments. And again, you're welcome to comment on other people commenting as well. So we said, based on this whole kind of environment, this landscape that we're in, we drilled it down to 3 things that we see make it more difficult. I'm going to share those 3 with you, and then we'll get into some conversation about them. So the first thing that is different in today's world is that we have more distractions than we've ever had. Meaning, if I went to work some time ago, whenever that was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 50 years ago, the average person had a few things they had to juggle. In fact, at that time, the role of leadership was to get each person making as few decisions as possible. Because if I only have to do a few things, I can be really good at those things. Today's world does not look like that. Today's world looks a bit more like this, right? And it's not just a few things we're juggling, right? Some of these are bowling balls, some of these are chainsaws, right? And we are just trying to keep everything in the air. So the first thing, very different, more decisions than we've ever had. The second thing that's different, and I know you'll all relate to this, is that our attention is under attack. So you've got the smartphone, the phone, email, voicemail, laptops, desktop, tablet. And then in the COVID world, you've got the cat running across your desk like mine did earlier today. You've got someone knocking on the door. So it's just the number of things that are demanding our attention. A pre-COVID study that I saw showed that the average knowledge age worker is interrupted about every 11 minutes, right? And I thought, wow, if you're trying to get work done, whether it's studying or completing a project, 11 minutes isn't that much time to focus. But what the study went on to say was that within that 11 minutes, we will on average interrupt ourselves twice. So we'll go back to our inbox to see what came in. We'll pick up our phone to see what pinged. So we are on average spending less than 4 minutes on any given task. Now, you can see in a world where I've got this happening amidst constant interruption, that leads to the third thing that is different in today's world that we have to wrangle with, and that is we are tired. Right? And it's not that physical exhaustion of working out on a farm that maybe our ancestors had. This is a mental exhaustion where you think, I have nothing left to give. And again, if my job every day I walk in the door, I walk into class, or I turn on my computer is to juggle hundreds of decisions, and literally hundreds. In fact, here's a little paradigm shift for you. Every email that you get is a decision. Right? So you can, in a very real sense, have hundreds and hundreds of decisions that you're making every day. But you do that amidst constant interruption, and our brains just aren't geared for it. So those are the three things that are very different than in today's world. Now, we've been doing an ongoing study for the last about 9 years, actually. So as we've entered into this new landscape, and we've been asking people, almost 500,000 people, all around the world, all industries, to say, how do you spend your time in this world? And here's what they say. They say that they spend, on average, 60% of things, or 60% of their time on things that they self-assess as important. And 40% of their time is spent on things that they self-assess as unimportant. Okay, I'm going to pause there. And I'm just interested in your thoughts, not a leading question. What do you think about this data? Come off mute if you're feeling brave and courageous. Love to hear your voice. Or you're welcome to chat. What do you think? Accurate, not accurate? Interesting, not interesting? Okay, Madhu, are you able to come off mute and tell us more about that? Not accurate. What would you say that data might look like? If you're talking, we still can't hear you. Or you're welcome to chat additional, but.
I can add on here. Hi, Payal again.
Hi, Payal.
My video is off because it's 11:30 here and I'm almost in my bed. So I think I could add on saying that I think it varies day to day, right? On a weekday when I'm getting tons of mails and I'm just getting into tons of meetings without having to do what I have to finish as my own contribution, I would say the unimportant takes a priority and maybe the important is lesser.
Yeah.
But on days when I'm being able to give my best, the important will be more. So I don't know how can we arrive at a constant number for all days. It will be a difficult task for sure.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing, and thanks for being here when it's so late. Such a pleasure to have you, Payal. Thank you. So a couple other comments, and thank you, Madhu, the background noise. No problem. Chatting is a great way to handle it. You know, we often hear when we're working with leaders and with individuals even, they will say that it's flipped. They'll say, we wish that we had 60% of our time on important things, right? And that they feel it's more accurate to say that more time is spent on things that they self-assess as unimportant. Now, another point to make here though, important to who? Right? Who, you know, I may say something's not important, but my professor or my boss is saying, no, that's important, right? So there's a bit of a rumbling or a wrangle that has to happen here around what does important mean. And even if this is just self-assessed and your professor or your boss is saying it's important and you're thinking, well, it's not to me. Think about the cost to engagement when I think more than, you know, almost half my time is spent on things that I don't think are important. And what does that do for me wanting to bring my best self to work every day? Even if others might say the numbers are different. And I really think this idea of being mindful on where we're spending our time is pretty important. If you check in the chat, some great comments here, right? Like you're on auto model, right? We're on autopilot. We're not being mindful about how we spend our time. If we give more time to it, it doesn't necessarily mean putting our full attention, right? So it's about the effort that you're bringing as well as just where you're passing the minutes. Thank you, great comments there. Now here's what I want you to know as we go into solving this or giving you a tool that might help with this. We are not saying that you will spend 100% of your time on important things. We're not saying, come spend an hour with us and all your time will be spent on important things. Like, we know that that's not realistic. But what we are saying is that if you can consistently shift time from below that line of importance to above it, you will get very different results. And my graduate work is in economics and statistics. So I like everything to be played out in numbers. So let's play this out in numbers. If you work 40 hours a week, and I know many of you as undergraduates are putting more time than that into your world, but if you work 40 hours a week, you're spending just over 2,000 hours a year at your job. 2,080, but we'll round it to 2,000. Let's say that you split out on this data, 60-40. That means you're spending 1,200 hours a year on things that you think are important and 800 hours a year on things that you believe aren't important. So let's say we shift this and we get it all the way to 70-30. That means you've just shifted 200 hours, 5 full-time work weeks or an entire month. Is that significant? Yeah, that's significant. So what we're saying is it's not about transferring every moment and never get a break and you're on all the time, but it is, how do you consistently carve out time to get to the things that really matter? Because it's in those moments that you really can make a difference. You can really get to the extraordinary outcomes and this extraordinary productivity we're looking for. So let me introduce you to the choices we need to make in order to get there. Again, 5 choices. This is the book we wrote. It's the framework we're operating from. Let me give you the really high level view of it. And then we're going to dive into choice 1 for some conversations, some exercises, and some discussion. And Alyssa, I'm going to ask you if there's anything in the chat as I'm talking that you want me to pause for. Just let me know. Just interrupt me and keep me on task there. And thank you to all of you for putting your thoughts there, because really important, great thoughts. Okay, so choice 1, act on the important, where we'll be spending our time. This is the foundational choice. This is where I discern what's important from what's less important. Choice 2, which is go for extraordinary, don't settle for ordinary. Those of you who were on our last session know that this is about defining our potential, our individual vision of extraordinary. Choices 1 and 2 combined are about decision making, right? So I mentioned 3 things we're tackling: decisions, attention, and energy. Choices 1 and 2 help you decide what's really worthy of your best attention. Choice 3, schedule the big rocks, don't sort gravel, is about prioritization. And we'll be having another call in about an hour and a half that will introduce you to choice 3. It's about prioritizing your day and your week to the things you've decided are important. Choice 4, rule your technology, don't let it rule you, is about aligning all of the tools and technology we have to help us accelerate our vision of extraordinary rather than hinder it. And then choice 5, fuel your fire, don't burn out, is about self-care. And you all know this. You cannot get too extraordinary if you feel like you're going to drop over, right? You have to care for yourself in a way that lets you bring your best mental and physical self to the most important things. Now, choices 3 and 4 are about attention, right? Prioritization and alignment. And then choice 5 is about your energy. So that's the framework that we operate from. Now, this really is about choices, right? It's about decision making. And we have one tool that we use to make decisions with. That tool is your brain. And sometimes we use it, and then sometimes when we make bad decisions, we think, did I use my brain? I don't know. Now, your brain is a very complex organ. There are 2 parts of your brain that I want us to talk about just briefly. You've got your prefrontal cortex. This is where you make decisions. And then you've got this more reactive part of our brain. We're actually going to go into a video that talks about these 2 parts of our brain and what's happening in today's world that's really compromising our ability to make great decisions. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. I realized I need to share with my computer sound on. And you'll just want to make sure, actually it should just play pretty seamlessly. If there's any problem, someone chat it in, but I think you'll enjoy this video. We're actually going to meet, sorry, before we begin, 5 scientists in this, 5 people who study the brain. The 4th one is incidentally blind. So you'll notice she's not tracking the camera with her eyes, but when you talk about being extraordinary, she is such a beacon of that. She, just so you know, she started losing her sight when she was 3, completely blind by the time she was a teenager, but she's a professor at Columbia. She's written best-selling books, and she's really an expert in this field. So I think you'll enjoy learning from her. Okay, so let me know if there's any trouble in the chat, and off we go.
For the past 25 years, I've been treating a neurological condition called attention deficit disorder. The key symptoms of ADD, distractibility, impulsivity, restlessness, disorganization, trouble planning, procrastination, have come to be key attributes of most people working and living in today's world. Well, interestingly enough, over the past decade or so, more and more people have been coming to me saying they thought they had ADD, but they didn't. They had what I call a severe case of modern life. The symptoms of overloaded circuits are very similar to the symptoms of attention deficit disorder. You feel frustrated, frantic, furious, fearful, forgetful, frenetic. You're in a state of frenzy. And as a result, you can't focus. You're distracted. You can't sustain mental energy on one task for much longer than a few seconds.
The environment, everyday activities are getting more and more complex, more and more full of information and demanding. We often talk about the new information society and the overflow of information. And this has created a very demanding environment for us. And you could say that our brain is under attack.
We have an executive brain, and our executive brain is where we do all of that productivity, planning, paying attention, self-control, the parts of our brain that really make decisions, make choices, and allow us to follow through on plans. And then we have an older part of our brain, the emotional brain, which is where we react to things. The problem comes in if we get stuck in our emotional brain and just keep reacting to things, because productivity is not busyness.
question that people often ask me is it possible to become addicted to making trivial choices in our lives? And I do think it is possible to become addicted to it. And in fact, I think it's becoming more and more probable that we become addicted to it, mainly because our lives have become so reactive that it's hard for us to not become addicted to making trivial choices. From the moment you wake up in the morning, you've got your phones going, you've got emails coming in, you've got text messages coming in. You don't have enough time to truly concentrate because you're concentrating on 2, 3, maybe 4 things simultaneously, which means that you are in a perpetual state of reaction orientation as opposed to proactively orienting yourself.
Every time we make a choice, we rewire our brains. I think somebody once said that bad habits are easy to form and hard to break, whereas good habits are hard to form and easy to break. So if you don't take an active part in changing the brain correctly, then it'll be sort of a slave to stimuli that are imposed upon it.
The greater presence of choice in our modern day lives means that we now have more opportunities to make worse choices for ourselves, particularly if you take the position of reacting to all the choices present in your life, but you also have greater opportunities to make better choices for yourself. And the only way we're going to get to that is by being more choosy about our choosing. You need to be strategic about choosing.
Okay, I'd like you to either, those of you feeling courageous, come off mute, or in the chat, just what stood out for you? What was the catchphrase, or what was interesting or impactful, resonated most with you in that video?
So I can say something.
Please.
Hi, I'm Anicia. I found it, very real, and it hit home for at least me when one of the speakers were saying that as soon as we wake up, we're, juggling 30 million things, constantly making decisions and having to react. But I understand that, and I, totally was like, oh, I've been there. I do that every day. But it's hard not to, because if you don't, you're going to fall behind. So how do you kind of balance, juggling all these things, but also proving your efficiency and your productivity to all the different, domains in your life?
Right. And what's interesting about that, again, this does go right back to the neuroscience. Like, our brains are wired to respond. Right. So thank you, Anicia. When your phone pings, you have a neurological response to that. When you have a flood of emails come into your inbox, you have a neurological response to that. And we get stuck in this reactive brain where you think, okay, I'm just going to crank through a bunch of email without pausing to say, wait, is there better use of my time? Right. I love how she called it the executive brain. It's sometimes called the CEO of your life. Is this executive brain, right? Because there's decisions and intentionality behind it. And it really does take a choice to say, okay, pause. Is this the best place to be spending my time? And I'll tell you something that, well, we'll get right into it. We have a tool that in this much time will pop you into your prefrontal cortex. So this is the tool we're going to kind of process, and hopefully, Anicia, helps you in that moment where you're like, okay, here we go again, to stop and say, wait, there might be a better way for me to discern what's important versus unimportant. So let me introduce you to this. Yeah, and thanks for the comment, Anicia. One of the things we're into, the choosy about choosing. I love that quote. You have to be choosy about your choosing, all right? You have to be intentional about choosing. Yeah, and just being frenetic and like all of those F words from our ADD expert. Yeah, frantic, frenzy, exactly. Thank you. Okay, so let me introduce you to this model. We call it the time matrix. Now, some of you may be familiar with this model. It's actually not a new model. It's been around for decades, but it will absolutely help you move from this reactive part of your brain into the thoughtful, executive thinking part of your brain. Now, the time matrix, it's pretty self-explanatory. There are 2 axes. a vertical one which represents importance, and a horizontal one which represents urgency. So together they form these 4 quadrants, and each one is based on those 2 criteria, urgency and importance. Now, if I can pause there for just a moment, well, let me just give you a moment to look at that, kind of look at each quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4, and what's in those. Again, pretty simple model. That's the beauty of it, is its simplicity, and pretty intuitive, which makes this an easy tool to use. It's intuitive and it's simple. And I think it's important that we define what we mean by urgent and what we mean by important. Because again, those, while intuitive, can mean different things to different people. So let me stop sharing so that I can see your faces. I'm interested in in fact, you're welcome to chat, but what does important mean to you? If we say, what is important? And there's no right or wrong answer here. But when someone says this is important, what does that mean? Not a textbook definition. You don't need to Google it really quickly, but just what does that mean to you?
I usually associate it with having some value to me or importance, having a purpose, but in a different context. It could mean a due date or, you know, an assignment that needs to be done.
Very good. I like that, needs to be done. Thank you. Thanks for speaking up. Other thoughts on what it means for something to be important? What would you add to that?
I think it's something that will have like a long-term effect on us, and if we don't make those marginal like choices on a daily basis, it's gonna ultimately affect our like life goals and things that we really want.
Well said. What I love about that comment, Dianan, is that it's about where we're going with this, right? Where does it get us? What's the outcome that we're driving towards? Similarly to Spina, this ROI, right? It's the return on investment. Every moment of your day, you are investing in something, right? So what are you getting back for that is a really, I think is a really insightful way to think of it. Thank you for that. When you look up the definition, Webster's definition, it says important means it's likely to have a significant impact on results. I think that's a pretty compelling definition too, but I do want to add one word to that. And I'm going to just type it in to the chat, because what I would say is that it's important if it's likely to have a significant impact on desired results. It's not just any results. Is it getting me where I want to go? That's the purpose of this. Okay, so let's go back to the time matrix to have a bit of a conversation about it. So quadrant 1, when we look at quadrant 1, these are things that are both important, you can see, and urgent. So we call it the quadrant of necessity. You can read through the list of things there. Here's what you have to confront. Every moment of your day is spent somewhere in that time matrix. Right? So opportunity cost, that means if you spend time in quadrant 1, you are not spending time in the other 3 quadrants. It's all a choice. So given that, why do we spend time in quadrant 1? Again, you can come off mute and pipe in, or you can chat. Why do we spend time in quadrant 1?
Maybe it is because we don't spend too much time in quadrant 2. So at the end, we ended up spending time in quadrant 1. But at the same time, I was thinking about in this current situation, because of the COVID-19, we are like in an emergency scenario, and we are taking decisions over time. So I think we spend time in quarter 1 because the context of an important event.
Yeah, thank you. How do you pronounce your name?
Rocio.
Rocio, thank you, Rocio. Because 2 things you said that were so insightful. There are real quadrant 1s, right? And you can see in some of the chats here, like it's dire, it requires attention. That's a real quadrant one. COVID hits us. That's a real quadrant one. There's nothing that could have, we could have foreseen. There are also created quadrant ones, right? So there's real quadrant ones and there's created quadrant ones. And Rocio, I loved how you owned that first piece. Well, maybe I spend time in quadrant one because I don't spend enough time in quadrant two, right? I've created my own. In fact, the poor planning that Catherine mentions, right? Poor planning, you can take a perfectly good quadrant two and just delay it a little bit. And then delay it a little longer, and then wait. And all of a sudden, what may have been a quadrant two is a quadrant one. In fact, I think you can probably neglect anything that's important to you long enough that it becomes quadrant one. You can neglect a relationship until it's dying, and you're going to be in quadrant one trying to save the relationship. Or you can neglect a health problem until you've got a serious, urgent health problem. Right, so there is a created element of it. I can be responsible for some of that. And the interesting thing about quadrant one is we go there because we have to, because of poor planning, we own it. But do any of you know someone who likes quadrant one? Have any of you ever said, I do my best work under pressure? Right? So that is me saying, I like the energy of urgency. And again, this goes right back into the brain science, because when something urgent comes at you, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your body releases dopamine, it releases adrenaline, and actually that reaction can feel pretty good. It gets you focused, it gets you moving. And that whole reaction served us very well when we were facing these, right? When what our urgency was a predator. Now, many of us don't face predators on campus, right? I mean, maybe, but you don't face a predator in the hallways at work, or the predator doesn't look like this predator, right? But we are facing all day, everyday urgencies. And it still gives you that little bit of adrenaline and a little bit of jolt that gets you moving. So this can just be the standard way it works for us, right? It's this button that gets pushed over and over, adrenaline, dopamine, and we just wait for the next urgency to hit. Do you relate to this, some of you? Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. I don't know if this concept has something to do with procrastination, because maybe I realize that sometimes I like this sensation of urgency, and I procrastinate in many projects. And when I'm close to the deadline, I work like really focused in that project, and I think that I achieve better results, but I feel exhausted at the end.
That second part of that, there is a price we pay when we work in quadrant one. And let's be clear, if I go back to the time matrix, quadrant one is not a bad place to be, right? Look at the importance level, right? Quadrant one gets you to your desired results, but just to your point, Rocio, there is a price we pay for it. You're exhausted. You start to pay health impacts. You start to compromise other things that might be every bit as important to you, right? The relationships or the preparation or getting out ahead of it. So it's not a bad place to be, but you're going to pay for living your life there, really. Thank you. Okay, so, and the great comment here. So you're more present. It's possible to make the best decision when urgency hits rather than contemplating it. There certainly are circumstances where that energy just pushes you right through, right? And the deep thought can really derail you, perhaps. So it's definitely not a bad place to be. It's getting you to your desired results, but there is a price for it. And living your life there will leave you exhausted, stressed out, more gray hairs. There's the price you're going to pay for it. Okay, let's talk about quadrant 3, and then we're going to actually go into a breakout room. So quadrant 3 is the quadrant of distraction. So this is where you've got things that aren't important, They're not getting you to your desired results, but they feel urgent. Why would we spend time in quadrant 3 if it's not important?
We usually go to distraction because it feels good in the moment, and it's a way for us to just cope and not deal with those problems and the feelings that we have of anxiety, and we just want to push it further along, similar to procrastination. So we just tackle on random unnecessary tasks just to make us feel better, like going on the hedonic treadmill, but then we slowly go down it and don't feel good about it. It reminds me of like whenever you're sad, you typically go for sweets, or when you don't sleep that much, you eat more, just because you have like less of a mental stability in you, and unimportant emails and tasks feel very important, and you feel like you're working super hard, yet you don't actually evaluate what it's worth.
Yeah, so much of what you said was incredibly insightful. Will you tell me how to pronounce your name?
Mia.
Mia, okay, sorry, I wasn't sure if it was M right. So Mia, thank you. The hedonic treadmill is gonna be like firmly anchored in my mind, so well said. And several things that you said are important, right? So it's easy to go there. It's easy to procrastinate there, right? So I'm exhausted from all of the effort that came from Q1, or maybe even that deep work in Q2. So I'll just open Outlook or my email, and I'll just spend, the whole day there, right? It's just an easy place to sink into. Also, Despina, your comment about pleasing others, this is one of the interesting things we see about quadrant 3. Because you come to me and say, I've got something really important, and I'm thinking, well, it's not to me, but you're standing right in front of me, or you've pinged me, or you've texted me. And I know it's not important to me, and I might even know it's not that important to you. But my inclination is to drop whatever I'm doing and say, how can I help you? Right? And I know this term, people pleaser occasionally has a negative connotation. I don't mean it negatively. You could use the word team player instead, right? I want to be a team player. And I am not saying at the end of this call, you should not be a team player. That is an important thing of how we work together. But no one is going to create boundaries for you, right? So if you want to get better outcomes, you have to make the choice. You have to create the boundaries. You have to learn how to say no. Now that 60-40 data that I shared with you earlier, that was actually time matrix data. We asked people, again, over 500,000 people around the world, a whole series of questions about where they spend their time and categorize it into the time matrix. 60% above the line, right, if this is that line, and 40% below it is where that data landed. Now I'm actually going to, let's see, I'm going to share a file in the chat. Now, last call we had a few people that struggled with this just a little bit, but I think most people were able to download it. So in the chat, so open up, click chat at the bottom of your screen, and there's a file that's going to come through that's just a picture of this that's on the screen right now. I want you to have a PDF of the time matrix. My encouragement would be for you to print it and hang it somewhere where you can see it, right? But the time matrix, let's see, did that, I think I sent it to one person instead of everybody. So just one second, let me try it again. Should be coming through. Oh, there it is. I think it's, did that work? Okay, good. Okay, so download that if you can. Otherwise, maybe you take a screenshot, because we're gonna go out into breakout rooms. Now, here's how a breakout room works. You're going to be put into a small session with just 3 or 4 other people. And you're gonna be in your own little room. I can't hear what you're saying. No one else can hear what you're saying. So everyone's gonna come off mute, and you're going to have a conversation. Let me stop sharing so that I can get this set up. You're just gonna have a conversation, and there's 2 things that you're talking about. First, you're going to discuss, why do you, personally, this is about you, spend time below the line, meaning quadrants 3 and 4. And second, how could you shift more time to be in quadrant 2? Okay, so those are the 2 questions you're going to answer with your colleagues. As I send you off into your breakout session, one thought. Quadrant 4, which is called the Quadrant of Waste, it sounds so harsh, it's called the Quadrant of Waste. Quadrant 4, people will often say, well, I go there because I need to rest or rejuvenate or recharge. And I just want to push your mindset just a little bit. Are resting, rejuvenating, and recharging important? Yeah, which means they aren't quadrant 4, because quadrant 4 is defined as not important. Okay, so when you say, well, I go to below the line because I just need to rest, that doesn't mean you're below the line. So it's this constant evaluation. So again, the questions you're answering: why do you spend time below the line? How can you shift more time to be in quadrant 2? Strategize with those around you. You're going to be with 3 or 4 other people. So, and then I'm going to give you 4 minutes there, 3 or 4 minutes, and then you'll have a little thing pop up that says, the breakout room is closing in 60 seconds. Just X out of that, and then 60 seconds later, it'll pull us back together all in one room. Okay, so I'm going to create the rooms. All you have to do is accept it. 3 to 4, you're going to be answering these questions. Off you go, and I will see you shortly. Okay, welcome back. How was your breakout room? Was it good? Good conversation? Okay, so you had someone, I hope that message came through. You picked someone to share one strategy to get more time in quadrant 2, or maybe it was a strategy to stay out of quadrants 3 or 4. If you were assigned, or if you just have a good idea to share, will you chat that into the chat pod now? One strategy. I'm going to type one of mine.
So I was in a group with Despina and Jolene, and we just discussed, quadrant 3 heavily, and, kind of outlined why, ways in which we fall into this category, ranging from, shutting down whenever we feel overwhelmed or procrastinating. But what really helped was a strategy of shifting mindsets that sometimes can be negative, or additional layer of anxiety. For instance, instead of, saying that, I'm a people's pleaser. I'm sorry, not people's pleaser, but, I'm a perfectionist. You can say, I just have a keen sense of paying attention to details. So all about changing shifts and changing priorities depending on that.
Thank you, Anicia. And I love your point about the mindset. So it all kind of starts with the mindset as well. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Catherine, you discussed shifting the mindset as well. Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that's been most impactful is learning to say no in a way that I'm comfortable with, right? Because some people have no problem saying no. It sounds like this, no. But it's not most of us, right? I mean, I tend to be that person, I want to be a team player. I want to invest in the relationship. And Stephen R. Covey, who is one of our co-founders, he authored the 7 Habits. He had a quote that I think of, I would guess, every day of my life. He said, "You are always saying no to something." Right? So you have to be careful, right? What are you saying no to? Are you saying no to the meaningful project that would make a significant contribution to your knowledge or what you're doing? Or are you saying no to email? Because it's one or the other, right? There's an opportunity cost to every moment. So thank you. And then great other comments. So it's prioritizing. Don't keep your email open all day. Yes, if you can put boundaries on your quadrant 3s, right? I know we often say, well, I'm going to reserve time for quadrant 2. Do that. Schedule that. But also reserve time for email and then close it when you're done. It's a brilliant idea. Thank you. Delegate things. You don't have to be involved with everything. Thank you, Jolene. That's a good one. Yeah, thank you. You know, here's one other tool that I'll send you with in terms of how you navigate the time matrix. it's a process we call our moment of choice. And I almost imagine it, those of you who remember the Staples Easy button, I think of it as like a button. And when something comes at me, I hit this button and I do three things. I pause, clarify, and decide. And at the end of this process, PCD, pause, clarify, decide, PCD process, I have made the decision as to whether this is something I should be focused on or not. Now, the pause is the critical piece here, because just to your point earlier, Anicia, this gets us out of the reaction. Now, the pause could be a fraction of a second, or on bigger projects, it might take a while where you really have to pause and you have to think, what is the impact of this project? What's the impact on my desired results? Does it get me closer to where I want to go? And some it's quick, you just know that is not something I should be focused on. But this idea of pausing, clarifying, and deciding can get you, again, the time matrix. When I think of the time matrix, this image often comes to mind because there is a return on your time, the way Despina said earlier in the comments. And quadrant 4, quadrant 3 are poor investments. Quadrant 1 will get you exactly what you put into it, maybe sometimes a little more, but quadrant 2 is this exponential return on your investment of time and energy. Okay, as we go into the kind of wrap up and Q&A, I have one more question for you, so get your typing fingers ready. And I'm going to have you type the answer to these questions, but not hit enter. We did this in our last session as well, so you'll remember it, some of you. I'm going to have you answer the question based on what we've covered, right? This whole idea of your decisions, attention, and energy, about your brain and how you make better decisions, getting into your prefrontal cortex, executive brain, and then this time matrix. Will you answer in the chat, number 1, what's been one takeaway for you in this session? And what will you do based on our session? I want a commitment from each of you. So don't hit enter. If you do, that's okay. But if you can wait to hit enter, then we'll all hit enter together in a moment and it'll all flood in. We'll see some great ideas. So type in what's been one takeaway and what will you do, but don't quite hit enter yet. Just one more moment here. Okay, everybody hit enter, and I'm so excited to see the things that flood in here. Let me give you a moment to start scrolling through some of these really great ideas, things you can do. You're gonna have to scroll up in the chat, see everybody's. Great ideas. So many insights here. So if you'll take a moment to read through those, I'm going to also put my email up and I'll type it into the chat as well, so that if you have additional questions, you're welcome to reach out. We will be sending a recording of the call, is that right? And we'll send that time matrix PDF as well, so that you'll have that. But if for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to turn it back to Alyssa. We've got time for question and answer. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you so much. This was a choice for you to be here, and I'd like to thank you for making that choice. It's been really wonderful to be with you. So take a moment to read through some of those great insights, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Lena. And I would say, you know, definitely this was a good choice, right? A good choice to spend your time thinking about these big questions that you presented. And thanks for your expertise and for walking everybody through that. We'd love to have questions if there is anybody else that has something they want to talk about. But thanks for Lena for sharing your email. And I'll look and see in the chat, or if anybody wants to come off of mute and ask another question, please do. You're getting lots of thank yous, lots of love out there.
Thank you. What a great group of people. I mean, you guys are in an exciting time of life right now, and I'm sure it's been a tough seven or so weeks for many of you. So sending lots of love your way as we endure this together as well.
That's right. Well, thanks. And we have another session, as was mentioned in the chat, just coming up in about an hour. So if anybody wants to log on, even if you didn't register before, you're welcome to join us. For that final session, we're going to talk about big rocks, don't sort the gravel. And so I think that will be interesting to see how that fits into the whole scheme of all the things we've learned today. So thanks again, Lena, for your time, and appreciate everybody else joining us today. So signing off for now. We'll see you in an hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.